Hello, this is William Strife for the Heads Up Podcast, Episode 3, April 14th, 2012. Okay, first order of business, Elements of Play, Episode 8, Stealth. It's up over on Machinima's channel. You can click through the link in the description or hit the video annotation if you want to check the episode out. But without further ado, let's get on to the actual meat of the podcast. Before I get to answering any actual questions though, I want to touch on the subject of current events and whatnot in the video game industry. There's a lot of things happening on a day-to-day basis, even more if you look at it weekly so. Whether it be about console rumors, people raging about the way that some particular game ends. There are an incredible number of things that happen on a weekly basis, and I'm certain that plenty of you out there hear the rumors and whatnot as well. All I want to say is that if there are any specific current events that you want me to comment on or possibly try to demystify anything along those lines, please go ahead, let me know. I can't comment on every last current event, even though I would like to of my own volition. I would much prefer to be pointed in a specific direction, say something if you see something in an article over the week that you want to hear something from me about, go to my most recent podcast, comment on it, I basically pick the comments out up through Friday and then I go from there. So just as long as you get your question in before Friday on my podcast, there's a chance that I'll answer it. Of course, obviously, the sooner you get your question in, the more thumbs it can get, and the more thumbs a question gets, the more likely I am to answer it. But that doesn't mean that I don't answer questions that don't get any thumbs whatsoever. With that being said, I'll move on to more or less a generic question that I received several times in my previous two podcasts. The question basically is, will I be doing more guides over Fallout New Vegas? And the answer is, I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would very much so like to do more guides, but seeing as how I'm having a really hard time getting guides out for Skyrim, which is a, quite frankly, newer, more important game to be covering at this point, chances are I won't be doing more guides for New Vegas. Now, that being said, at this point in time, I'm looking at New Vegas the same way I looked at Oblivion for a long time. For a long time before Skyrim was released, I was still doing guides over Oblivion here and there. I wasn't really focusing on it too much though. So basically, I look at Fallout New Vegas like a book that's still open. I'll still make guides over it if I have time, but it's no longer my focus. It's put off to the side, it's on the back burner, and just basically it's completely at the mercy of how much free time I have and my schedule. So if I had to give you any definitive answer, I would say no, probably not. But at the same time, there's always that sliver of a chance that I will. What would push me to do that, I don't know. But as it currently stands, don't bet your money on it. I'm sorry if that's really a disappointment to you, but New Vegas, it's more or less in the back of my mind now. Alright, now let's move on to a couple of questions. Alright, the first question here actually received quite a few upvotes, and it's from Fishing Gun. What do you prefer, JRPGs or WRPGs? Alright, for those of you who don't know what these acronyms mean, as was demonstrated in the comments, JRPG stands for Japanese role-playing game, and WRPG stands for Western role-playing game. And this basically refers to the difference between something along the lines of, your BioWare type Mass Effect or Dragon Age type RPGs versus your Final Fantasy type RPGs. Obviously, your Dragon Age and your Mass Effect, they came from Western companies in America, and Final Fantasy and games like it, Breath of Fire and whatnot, they came from Japan or Japanese developers. And there's a significant difference between the way that these two games play and function and everything. I mean, if you've ever played these two separate types of games, then you understand. But anyway, the subject of which one I prefer, JRPGs or WRPGs, it's kind of hard to pin it down, but I'm going to have to say Western RPGs are really my preferred flavor. Like so many people, my first taste of RPG was Japanese RPGs. The Final Fantasy series and whatnot, Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, back on the Super Nintendo. I mean, I was absolutely addicted to Japanese RPGs at a certain point in my life, and it was because they offered something up. And one of the reasons I ended up playing so many Japanese RPGs was because I didn't own a computer for a pretty significant chunk of my life whenever I was younger and I was getting into video games. The thing is, Western RPGs, they got their start from, the original tabletop gaming RPG type stuff. Stuff that you see from companies like Wizards of the Coast. Basically, your Dungeons and Dragons. That whole system of, crunching numbers that you see in games, your skill levels are this, and you cast the die, and, that number basically works into a computation, and you figure out how much damage you do. That entire system that you did in pencil and paper is literally where Western RPGs got their start. It was literally the process, either parodying that system or licensing the literal system that came from the tabletop gaming and putting it into a computer program. And because tabletop gaming reaches so far back, the first way that they could get that into a computer program was obviously on a computer. Now, sometime in the past, the American video game market completely crashed. It 100% collapsed. And it didn't come back to life until Nintendo brought the Nintendo Entertainment System to America. Now the thing is, when the video game market crashed, it didn't affect Japan as heavily, which is why their console video game market survived. And Nintendo is more or less responsible for why consoles came back to America. I mean, you can debate that, whether or not it's absolutely true, whether Nintendo is actually owed that much, but what is to be certain is that because of the crash, home console gaming in America was kind of null and void. So as a result, Western RPGs grew up on PC, and they had their own, and it was a niche market. It grew up on its own, not touching consoles whenever they came over, because just like today, there's a difference between the power of a personal PC and a console. The difference is that a personal PC wasn't in everybody's house. You had to be a nerd to have something like that. So basically, for a significant amount of my childhood, I did not have access to a PC, and as a result, consoles were the only way I got my video games. So naturally, because Western RPGs grew up on computers and have subsequently, really only recently, made the transition over to console with the Xbox 360 and the PS3 and whatnot, I never had access to Western RPGs. Since I was a console-only kid, the only way that I could get my hands on RPGs were the JRPGs that were published on them. So, that's my heritage, that's where I come from, and I played a lot of JRPGs. But the thing is, there's a significant difference between the way a JRPG and a WRPG are constructed. And this is a gross generalization, it's obviously not true across the board, but one of my biggest problems with JRPGs is that they're more focused on telling their own story and just letting you control the character. They're not so much about saying, this is your story. You are making the choices. The first authentic Western RPG that I played that sticks out in my mind is Fable. And Fable was significant to me because it had all of the elements that the JRPG had, but it was a lot more streamlined. You could run around, hack and slash things. You didn't have to go into a turn-based battle system. You still leveled up. But most importantly, I was given choices, and that carried an incredible amount of weight with how I viewed the game, how I judged the game. The fact that I was given that option is really what switched me over to Western RPGs as a whole. And moreover, Western RPGs, for some reason, are more centered around the concept of not restricting the player. I mean, you look at a lot of Western RPGs nowadays, there's Deus Ex, there's Mass Effect, there's Dragon Age, the Elder Scrolls series. All of these games, they don't really restrict where you can go in the game. Granted, there are limitations, such as in Deus Ex Human Revolution, you're kind of stuck in the city hub of Detroit for a significant amount of time, but it's not exactly a small area, and moreover, you don't necessarily need that wide open world game mechanic to make it work. Japanese RPGs tend to be a lot more restrictive when they start out. They don't give you options, they don't give you direction. Now, like I said, that's not completely true, it's not across the board, Most of the Final Fantasy games back in their heyday, they allowed you to run around on a world map, but at the same time, you weren't allowed to run around that world map all the time, and moreover, not always from the very beginning of the game. But more to the point is that Japanese RPGs seem to be a whole lot more interested in telling you a story about their character. As in, the only reason that you are there, partaking of the experience, is to get the main character from point A to point B. It's not your responsibility to make choices. Actually, you as a gamer have no responsibility over the main character other than to make certain that he or she does not die during battle sequences. Other than that, you don't have a single bit of influence over the story, and that's not necessarily bad. It's just a lot more restrictive than the Western RPG concept of let's give the player choice. So that's my reasoning behind why I prefer Western RPGs to Japanese RPGs. Of course, at the same time, I still play Japanese RPGs. Just because I don't like them as much doesn't mean that I don't like them. Heck, I played through Final Fantasy XIII in 1 week whenever it came out, and even though to this day I do not really like the story in Final Fantasy XIII, I still liked the way it looked, I liked the way it felt, I liked the characters, and I felt that the battle system was pretty well fleshed out. But yeah, Western RPGs over Japanese RPGs. Not to say that I don't like Japanese RPGs. Okay, this next question comes from user Battlerin. Maybe it's Batalrin. Don't really know. But the question is, do you think that Skyrim has surpassed Oblivion? And if so, in which areas? As far as the Skyrim versus Oblivion debate goes, I think that Skyrim has really improved upon a lot of weak points that Oblivion had, but at the exact same time, I feel that it's traded a little bit too much of its roots, its RPG style, and basically its complexity in the name of trying to get more people to play it. Despite the fact that that's how I feel, though, I accept how Skyrim has changed, how the Elder Scrolls has basically changed. But obviously, Skyrim has much better combat, much better visuals. The interaction with NPCs is superb. It has far better dungeons in it. There are a lot of improvements, but above everything else, I feel that Skyrim isn't really an entirely new Elder Scrolls game so much as it is Oblivion 1.5. It's not completely different, it's not an entire change-up, it's not what Oblivion was to Morrowind. So basically, the way I look at it is the things I like about Skyrim, you know, the better combat, the better graphics, the better world, the better dungeon. What I don't like about Skyrim is its menu system. It doesn't give you enough information. It tries to be streamlined, but it needs to be clunky at the exact same time to get you enough information. The leveling system, while I don't have a problem with the way you level your skills up, that's completely natural to me, I like it. What I don't like is the idea that you can just level up instantly. I really preferred the system from Oblivion and Morrowind where you had to go out, find a bed, and sleep in it in order to raise your level. Another thing that I don't like about Skyrim is its magic. This is a place where I feel that Bethesda completely missed the mark. The game just falls flat on its face whenever it comes to magic, because it's not complicated enough. There's not enough to it. It's a very bare bones system. You have 3 basic spells: your fire, your frost, and your lightning. And it feels a whole lot like there should be more to the destruction magic than there is. The entire magic system was pruned and simplified, and I do not like it in the least. Whenever I get into any game where magic is an option that I can pursue, I always feel that magic is the most complicated of all the things you can use, because if you're playing a stealthy character, it's real simple. You just stay in the shadows, out of sight, and you try to kill people or steal whatever you can without being seen. If you're an archer, it's always a scenario of, how far away is the target? Can I aim that well? Am I actually going to hit? Whenever you're playing something like a warrior or a soldier or something, it's real simple. It's just take weapon, hit enemy, real simple. But whenever it comes to magic, it's more of a scenario of, how can I chain my spells together? Is it possible to, tech my tree up so that I don't have to spend excess amounts of mana, or magicka in the Elder Scrolls? It's always been more of a intelligent pursuit whenever you go into Magic, because you have to crunch numbers, you have to think about whether or not you can actually cast the spell more than once when you go into battle. There's just a series of things that I found to be either ripped out or overly simplified in Skyrim when it came to the magic, and it just completely took the enjoyment of casting spells away from me. That's really my biggest complaint about Skyrim. Beyond that, I find the game to be fantastic. There's nothing to really complain about in the long run. All of the technical flaws and issues that I had with Oblivion, they were resolved, they were removed. So, yes, I think that Skyrim has surpassed Oblivion. Do I think that everything that it did was better than Oblivion? No, not at all or in the least. But by and large, yes, Skyrim, I think, has surpassed Oblivion. Alright, this next question is from the amazing Atheos. What do you think Fallout 4 will be like? I.e., do you think Fallout 4's individual skill level up will be like Skyrim's, or will it stay like Fallout 3's and New Vegas's? Okay, this one is real simple and straight. It's gonna stay the way it has been. They're not going to switch it over to the way that the Elder Scrolls works. There are a couple of reasons why I come to this conclusion, and you need to know a little bit of history in order to understand. Back when Bethesda Game Studios was still working on the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, they got their hands on the rights to make 3 Fallout games whenever Interplay started to tank. And one of the things that happened later down the line was Bethesda nullified the rights to make just 3 games when they actually acquired the Fallout franchise in full. They can do whatever they want with the entire franchise as they see fit. Now, the reason why I say that they're not going to change the level up system in the Fallout series is because of the way that they responded to internet queries pertaining to whether or not they would release the original files of Fallout 3 Van Buren. Now, for those of you who don't know, the original Fallout made by Black Isle Studio was actually in like the 80 or 90% range of being complete before the studio was shut down and the project was scrapped. Now, whenever Bethesda got their hands on all the rights for the Fallout franchise, one of the things that came with the package was the program and all the assets that came with the original Fallout 3 build. And Bethesda looked at it and said, we don't want to touch this. We're going to build our own version of Fallout 3. And it ended up getting out onto the internet that Bethesda had access to the original Van Buren build of Fallout 3. And whenever Bethesda was asked, will you release the alpha build of the original Fallout game? The response was, legally, we can. But as artists, we do not feel comfortable publishing other people's unfinished works just because we have that legal control. As interesting as that story is, what's important to get out of it in relation to the question, will Fallout 4 end up using the Elder Scrolls level up system? What that story says to me is that Bethesda respects Fallout for what it is. They are not looking to change it. They are not looking to radically and drastically switch up the system. They understand what Fallout is, and they're trying to, remain as honest and as close to the actual original idea of the game as they possibly can be while still moving into the future. And for that exact reason, there is no doubt in my mind that Fallout 4 will continue to use the same basic level up system, even if they switch up the skills. You shoot people, they fall over dead, you get experience, you can distribute that experience once you level up. There is no question in my mind. And if anything, you're seeing more influence from the Fallout series onto the Elder Scrolls series because of how extremely integrated perks became in Skyrim, as opposed to how there were only a very few perks in comparison in Oblivion, and in Morrowind there were none whatsoever. So take that as you will. Alright, this next question comes from the Realistic Hypocrite. Which do you prefer, the Fallout series or the Elder Scrolls series? Leveling system, story, weapons, etc. Well, real easy and straight. I like the Elder Scrolls series much better than I like the Fallout series. I like the leveling system in the Elder Scrolls a whole lot better. The entire idea of being able to use a weapon and, you know, improve your proficiency with that weapon, just literally based on hacking it, slashing at people. I really like the story of Fallout better. It feels more tangible. It feels like there's more direction to it. It doesn't feel as wishy-washy per se. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's not a whole lot of structured story in the Fallout series like there is in the Elder Scrolls. In the Elder Scrolls, you start the game, there's a structured main story, but at the same time you can follow the exploits of the Companions Guild in Skyrim, or the Mages Guild in Oblivion, or the Thieves Guild in Morrowind, or any other sort of guild that's available in any of the games, and they all have their own stories to follow. There's actual structured direction if you decide not to mess with the main quest. Fallout doesn't really have as much of that. I mean, it's there, but there's no significant big chain quest stuff going on that compares to the guilds and whatnot in the Elder Scrolls series. So for that exact reason, I like Fallout better as far as story goes, because the main story, the actual main story, is written better. As far as weapons go, that's a real hard one to pin down, because let's face it, I mean, there's nothing quite as satisfying as smacking someone in the face with a claymore, or lighting someone on fire with a fireball, or possibly freezing someone's shoes to the ground with an ice spell. But at the same time, there's no getting around the fact that spending time blasting people in the head with guns, whether it be bullets or lasers, and watching them liquefy or explode into bloody chunks, there is no getting around the entertainment value in that. It's just absolutely awesome. So I guess I'll have to stick with the guns in Fallout. It's a whole lot funner to shoot people and watch them in VATS than it is to smack people around with swords. Even with that being the case, I prefer the Elder Scrolls because there's just more free range. I enjoy the entire concept of go anywhere, do anything, and there are actual storylines out there that I can follow that aren't the main story. And, you know, it's basically the exact same reason for why I prefer Fallout for story that I prefer the Elder Scrolls overall. The Elder Scrolls just flat out has more to do with structured story, thus I like it better. But as far as main story goes, you know, Fallout, that's where it's at. But yes, Elder Scrolls over Fallout. Alright, this last question was one that I couldn't get to during my last podcast because I decided that the time limit had been reached. It's from Super Shining Knight. It would be entertaining to hear your thoughts on the Skyrim DLC Bethesda will be coming out with. A lot of people already have some pretty well thought out ideas, but I want to hear your thoughts and ideas. Alright, as far as DLC for Skyrim goes, there's no serious, tangible proof that anybody has anywhere about what Bethesda is up to and what they're going to do. And one of the reasons for that is Bethesda is one of the most tight-lipped developers out there. It's almost impossible to find something out that they don't want you to know. Very infrequent that the development team ends up leaking anything at all. Now, that being said, my intuition and what I've seen and the statements that I have actually heard from the horse's mouth from Bethesda, not from another media outlet, nothing that could be misconstrued. Just what I speculate based on the authentic information that came from Bethesda itself is that Skyrim is not really going to have much of anything in the lines of DLC. It's going to have content more along the lines of expansion packs that you saw for PC games back in the 90s. If you wanted to compare it to anything nowadays, I guess you could say something like The Ballad of Gay Tony or The Lost and the Damned from Grand Theft Auto 4. Those experiences, you know, they were so large that they ended up being sold as individual games, albeit smaller than the actual Grand Theft Auto 4. Now don't misunderstand me there. I'm not saying that Skyrim is going to get experiences that will be sold on their own. They're going to be expansion packs. There's no doubt in my mind about that. What I'm saying is that the DLC is going to be of considerable size. It's not going to be something small. And the reason why I come to this conclusion is because Todd Howard, the creative director for Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls, and Fallout for that matter, whenever he was asked about the possibility of downloadable content for Skyrim some months ago, his response was that, you know, whenever they created DLC for Fallout 3, that was the first game where they had full-fledged big-time support for DLC, and they had a way to distribute it and everything. His statement was that they did not like the development phase for the Fallout downloadable content because it was erratic. It was erratic at best, and it was very messy. They didn't like it. It was not a system that they preferred, and they wanted to shy away from that. Followed by which he said he was more interested in doing what they had done in the past with previous games, doing something akin to the Shivering Isles, where they have more time to put a much larger amount of content together. So, based on this, I would expect expansion content between the size of Shivering Isles or maybe something like the Tribunal expansion pack for Morrowind, but something in the size of the Shivering Isles to the size of Point Lookout for Fallout 3. And because of the size of these content packs, I would judge that there would only be, at most, 2 of them. There's a possibility that there would be more than that, or less than that maybe. I could be completely off the mark, but honestly, based on the information that I have actually heard from Bethesda Softworks, it is larger content in smaller amounts. It's not going to be a weapon pack or a new mission or anything. It's going to be a new area with new quests. They might have new equipment and whatnot to back it up. There'll be new NPCs. There will be new characters for you to engage with. And, where they could go with that stuff is questionable. I know for one that there's a lot of terrain of Morrowind and Cyrodiil that is contained within the Skyrim files, and the official statement on that is they had to have that terrain there so they knew what you could see from Skyrim, but when questioned about whether or not they would use it for expansion content, Todd Howard's response was, "We don't know." Just flat out, we don't know. And based on that, I say there's a possibility, but probably not. If there was going to be any expansion content taking place in areas outside of Skyrim, I would put a fair amount of weight behind the possibility of Morrowind being the case, because ever since the eruption of Red Mountain, the volcano in the middle of the island Vardenfell that you were running around on in Morrowind, since that volcano erupted at some point in the past during the game's lore, it would significantly restructure the landscape, and it would give them a lot of options to, just rebuild the area and say, well, that's what it used to look like. After the eruption, it looks like this. But I can't say for certain what, the actual content, what they're going to do, where they're going to take it. I have no earthly idea. But as far as the general premise goes, it's going to be large content packs, but not a whole lot of them. Well, that's all for this week. Thanks for listening, and be certain to keep asking questions. If you come up with anything over the week that you can think of that you might want me to answer, go ahead, come back to the video, post it in the comments. There's a chance that I'll see it. After all, comments kind of thin out over the week. If you post later, there's a chance there might be a better chance that I'll see it. No guarantee there, though. Anyway, like I said, thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Thank you.